another episode with Career Kickstart Conversations. I'm your host, Sarah, and today I'm joined by a great guest, Mackenzie. I'll pass it over for a quick introduction, and then we'll jump into today's topic.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm Mackenzie Connors. I come from a background of recruiting and talent acquisition, as well as HR business partnership. I started my career in outside recruiting and then moved to internal recruiting at Advanced Auto Parts. From there, I really transitioned into HR business partnership in that world. I very recently took a role with Fortrea on their global HR business partnership team as well. Of course, everything that I share today isn't a viewpoint of Fortrea, but on behalf of myself, I'm really excited to be here and share that with you today.
Wonderful. Yeah, we're so excited to have you on. And today we're talking about building your personal brand. So just jumping really into it, when you hear personal brand, what do you feel like that means in the workplace for someone?
Sure. When you think of personal brand, it's really what someone says about you in a room you may not be in. Well, that's not a negative way, right?
Yeah.
But really thinking about when someone discusses you as a person and you as talent, what stands out? Where do they think of with muscle? And where would they choose to use you in key roles? So if a project comes up that's key and responsible for certain areas, where do you trigger in their mind?
That makes sense. So what would you say for someone who maybe they don't have a really strong personal brand at this point, or maybe it's just something they haven't really thought of? How would they go about building like a strategy to build a good personal brand?
Yeah, I think you really have to first think of where you're trying to go, right?
Yeah.
So thinking big picture and in advance, where do I really want to focus? Do I want to be a leader of teams? And I have to think of different areas that I need to be knowledgeable in. Or do I want to be really specialized and niche down? In that area, I need to go a lot deeper, but I don't need to go as broad. From there, it's really thinking about how do you collect that strategy, right? So as I'm thinking of new skills or experiences that I can build my brand, do they come to that bigger picture of where I'm trying to go, or are they possibly distracting?
That makes sense. Okay. And when do you feel like you realized like personal brand really mattered in your career?
Sure. I think I was involved in a lot of discussions really early on within talent acquisition, first of all. As we looked at candidates, right? Was someone presenting their brand in a way where they were a subject matter expert or they had this big experience? Or was their experience a little all over the board? And then I also had this personal experience where essentially my department leader at the time had tapped me to do a project that in the moment, I didn't quite understand why me, but I was like, okay, fantastic. I haven't had a lot of exposure to her. So I try to take that as an opportunity. I have a skill set of really being able to tell a story through a presentation and make sure that the why is there. And I used that when creating this deck for her for an outside organization. This then led to me kind of being more on her radar. When a role opened up that was a split like EA chief of staff role, she tapped me if I'd be interested in interviewing. I was really excited by that. But again, kind of like, where is this building my career? But had I not taken that first step seriously, that role really helped launch me into HR business partnership and different areas of HR that then led to other steps in my career. So one, I'm really thankful for that opportunity. Yeah. But two, if I hadn't have taken that more seriously and had a chance to really build my brand and brand awareness with that role and even that first project, I may not be where I am today. So really thinking about how you weave that in and even just small instances.
That makes sense. And what would you say to someone who feels like, my personal brand, I should be like mastering everything. I should be good at everything or feel good at everything. Do you think that's true? Should they more so be focused on like a certain amount of strong skill sets to be remembered for, or like what would be more important?
I personally feel that niching down where possible is beneficial.
Okay.
Think of a sports player, right? People are known for a certain set of skills or a certain ability. They're not known for playing every position on the field. It's just not possible, right? And so while you want to be well-rounded and you want to be able to flex and stretch, you also want to bring everything back to that core brand. So even if you have a certain skill set that you weave into other projects and abilities, you're still pulling it back to that core where you have that personal image.
That makes sense. And what about for people who are looking at their, they're listening, they're like, I'm not really sure what are my signature skills. Like, how would they go about trying to uncover what those might be?
I think there's like two ways to evaluate that. One, you have managers kind of coming to you. What does leadership ask of you? Are there things that, even though it's a team assignment, you're kind of consistently looked to for? Or think about where you feel naturally comfortable. There are definitely things within our roles that we enjoy and that kind of gives us that good sweet spot. And there's others where like, that part of the day, right?
Yeah.
And while you definitely want to build muscles that you feel weaker in, because that's important too, those areas where you really feel like it's a sweet spot, lean on those. It doesn't mean that you won't continue to sharpen and build that, but how do you kind of pull that in? Oftentimes that's a good sweet spot for starting where your personal brand may go. And again, always pulling back to that original strategy.
That makes sense. Was there a time in your career when you realized personal brand really matters? Was there a time where you had received maybe like certain feedback or heard something about yourself that you were like, this is what I'm working towards. This is my brand.
Yeah, I think early on in my career, I had a lot of different experiences with leadership and thinking about how to really sell the team, right? So early on, I was in talent acquisition and selling that as a service. And I was talking to CEOs and leadership of heavily funded companies. And I was very junior, right?
Yeah.
So I had to have something to set me apart. And what I really leaned in on is the fact that at heart, I'm a business geek. I really love like the math behind like how to kind of raise your bottom line and different ways that you can focus on that. But with that, I leaned in to really make them understand that, one, I can help raise their bottom line, understand how their business makes money. And I continue to use that today, right? My husband is an entrepreneur. We have a lot of conversations over dinner around how business models can work, what can be most profitable. And I use that with business leaders now. If I take on a new group, I really try to make sure they know that I understand their team. So that way, when I'm giving advice, I have the ability to influence. It's not just kind of coming in with different baseline tactics. It's really understanding them.
That makes sense. Okay. And so I know we've touched a little bit on uncovering the skill set. So you're a little bit later on maybe in your career and you've established, this is my personal brand. When is it a time to be like, maybe I need to add a new skill into my personal brand or try to strengthen a skill?
That's a good question. I think when you think about feedback that you've gotten, are there common themes? As you change leaders, you may get different sets of feedback, but you can often find a strand that kind of goes all the way through. So is that something that you can focus on? And also, are you hitting speed bumps? Whether that be for the next role that you're interested in, but you feel like you're maybe being passed over because you don't have something, or within your current role and you're hitting these hurdles. I think what you really have to think about is what's holding me back, and is there something that I need to take me to the next level? Whether that be a skill set, a different experience, etc. You can really evaluate that. But what do you feel like is giving someone pause if you're interested in growing?
That makes sense. So what about like if someone, how would they approach maybe like learning a new skill that's fully out of their comfort zone? Is it more just internally, maybe like a good pep talk? Are you going to a manager and trying to get more feedback or having them help you with that growth of a new skill? How would someone approach that?
You can always reach out and ask for stretch assignments.
Yeah.
That's always welcomed in my experience anyways.
Absolutely.
If you're wanting to shadow somebody or even give a hand, you always want to add value. But if it's something that you fully don't understand, I really like the idea of kind of borrowing someone's cape. It's a concept that I learned at a women's conference years back. But essentially, if I have a mentor that I really look to for a certain skill set, they probably have certain techniques and ways that they do something.
Yeah.
So getting comfortable in a setting can sometimes be channeling that person, not to imitate them, right?
Yeah.
But to really think of how their style would pull into the setting, and then making it your own, right? So as you get more comfortable, maybe I'm thinking a little bit less on how somebody else would deliver this, but still using those skill sets to push me through. And it can be really beneficial. I did that early in my career when thinking about how to chat with large groups of leaders on a topic that may not be as exciting.
Yeah.
And I had a really close mentor who was really great at explaining the why and the what's in it for me or what's in it for the employee, because you need leaders buy-in to be able to pull that into their organizations, right? And I channeled her at first. I was like, this is so not going to be a popular conversation. And it happens sometimes with an HR strategy, right? So
Sure.
it's going to come up. I had to get comfortable with it. But at first I was like, I'm just going to lean on how she would approach this.
Yeah.
And later on, I made it my own.
Amazing. And kind of touching on that, so skill set wise, have you ever added in a new skill set that shifted how others perceived your brand? Do you think it's important to be changing your brand over time, or is it good to just stay with what you have?
I think you always have to think about the evolution and what's needed. For me, I initially started my career maybe a little less direct.
Okay.
And some of that was the roles that I was playing, right? I didn't need that or wasn't necessarily appropriate in some conversations. Today, I need that quite a bit more. I got that feedback like, hey, not that I think that you come on too strong, but you could be a little more direct. And I was like, okay, I hadn't really ever thought about it, but I'll practice that. Today, I feel like I almost have to tone that back at times, but I'm okay with that. But it's something that I learned that I think gives me credibility because, well, I have to be direct and not dance around something that may need to occur. I also have to speak with empathy and kind of thinking about how that all blends together. So yeah, I do think your career evolves over time and it helps your brand as well. Kind of going back to an earlier point, feedback's always a gift. So if someone gives you that, it's not because they're just criticizing you. They want to see you grow. So thinking about it.
Absolutely. And do you feel like there are like small everyday actions someone can take to really reinforce their brand at work?
Yeah, I definitely do. Again, thinking about those shadow opportunities or stretch assignments, asking to own something kind of end to end so that you have certain things that really come with your name. If you're not getting those things organically, you can always think about training assignments, whether you have the ability to self-assign those within your organization. Another thing that I think can be really beneficial is education or certifications. I felt like if somebody was looking at my resume, potentially you could think I ended up in HR by mistake. Now, that wasn't the case, right? But most of my experience, especially in business partnership, had been built at one organization.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But I wanted people to read my resume and know that was a true interest of mine. So I dove into getting my SHRM CP, which is an HR certification. Really, it helped me. And I gained other things out of it, but it was also really to build brand, right? So if you kind of looked at that, it had like one more identifying badge, and that was helpful. Those exist in a lot of different areas. So something that people could explore. And I think also if you're looking for free resources, there's plenty of those out there as well. Yeah. So you don't always have to look within your organization.
Absolutely. And what about you're really proud of your brand and these skill sets of making it visible to others, but without being maybe like too much or bragging? Like, how do you balance that?
That's a great question. I think it all comes with authenticity. You always want to speak with authority. But when you're helping to educate somebody else, people can read through that authenticity versus feeling like you're trying to prove yourself is right.
Yeah.
Spreading knowledge is always appreciated. So I think it's all in the delivery and how you say something.
Absolutely. And if someone listening wanted to try maybe like one new thing a week to strengthen their brand, what would be like first to your mind for it?
I think my biggest thing would be to come off mute. And what I mean by that is you can have a ton of knowledge, but if you're not making that aware to others, it's really hard for people to know. And so oftentimes in large meetings, somebody may come to the speaker after with a piece of feedback or something they could add. Share that with the team, let others hear, one, to gain knowledge from you, but also be able to give feedback. But that still just gets added to your brand and kind of something that you share and building that bigger picture. So sharing with audiences where appropriate.
So speaking kind of like where appropriate, I know we've talked a lot of positives on it. obviously it can go on the other side. Have you ever seen someone dilute their brand? And if so, like, how did that happen?
Sure. I think actions really matter,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes people lean really heavily on being really great at their role from a tactical standpoint or a delivery standpoint. I can deliver great things, and so maybe my other actions don't matter as much.
Yeah.
And they don't get as looked past as I think sometimes people believe. So making sure that you're really living out culture, talent delivery behaviors, and consistency to be able to not distract from the things that you do really well.
And do you feel like, maybe you have done something negative that kind of hurt your brand? Like, how to pivot? How would someone pivot from that?
Yeah. I can definitely use myself as an example. Like early on, I was probably a little too strict when it came to policy. I was very like, okay, these are the rules and here's how we're going to take this forward. Definitely don't want to break policy, but you can play within the bounds to get the business leaders moving. You don't want to be red tape, right?
Yeah.
And I think that falls into a ton of areas, HR or others. I got a business leader early on that obviously got that opinion of me.
Yeah.
And I took it as an opportunity, right? I didn't want to just back away from it and just scratch that relationship off as that is what it is. Instead, I tried to really make fast wins, learn her group, and also really kind of help the bigger picture move along. And the relationship recovered. So I think when you notice that, when people notice someone maybe getting a different image, or maybe you made a mistake and you're trying to reevaluate, pulling back with, how can I make this recover? How can I maybe give a little extra effort to make sure it wins? And then pulling that more into the norm and trying to kind of gray that out, essentially. Everybody's going to have something in their career. It's just impossible. No one is perfect.
No.
And so thinking about how you build past that one mistake.
Absolutely. And do you feel like imposter syndrome plays a role when people are building their brand?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that nothing can kind of get you faster than self-doubt, right? And so if that's in your ear, you really have to think about why you're in the position that you're in today, right? You were chosen for a reason. You interviewed for these roles, or you were selected for a promotion. Companies, if they're good at what they're doing, aren't hiring people because they'll just fill this one role or because they're able to do the baseline skill set. They're hiring people because they believe in them. They see the growth and the potential and also what they can do today. So just remember, there's a reason why you're in your role, and to kind of try to suppress that and remind yourself of that when that self-doubt creeps in.
And how, I guess, to like someone's listening and they have fear of maybe being too visible, like how do you actually push through that?
I think often if you're conscious of being too visible, you're probably not. And what I mean by that is I can think on a very small hand how often I felt like somebody was too visible. And that shrinks even further when I think of people being visible for the right reasons.
Okay.
So in that, don't over-evaluate a chance to speak up, right? Of course, when you do add value and make sure that it's meaningful, but you're not likely to be too visible. So again, kind of going back to that imposter syndrome or self-doubt, try not to let that be your focus.
Absolutely. And to kind of summarize it all up, if you could leave the listeners with 2 or 3 quick tips for building a strong, authentic brand, what would it be?
I think kind of breaking it back down to the formula. I think, again, setting that guiding light, right? And making sure that the efforts that you're doing pull back into the strategy of building your personal brand. Taking opportunities when they come to you, making sure that you take even the smallest opportunity seriously and allow that to build brand awareness. And lastly, make sure that you self-advocate. People don't know that you want something or that you're interested in something if you don't speak up. And oftentimes, if you don't, you can mistakenly be overlooked. So making sure that you speak up for yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know before we even hopped on here, we talked about sometimes like personal brand isn't even something you're aware of or think of, and it is really important. So I really hope, this conversation maybe help people think of their brand or help you pivot if you're not happy with where it's at. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes.